Part 2. One major problem with the Big Five is the words themselves. Namely, as the late Jack Block put it, quote, "There prove to be large differences among psychologists in their understandings of these five-scale domains when they are elaborated as to their fuller psychological meanings. From one of the representations of the five-factor model to another, the psychological flavorings of the five factors can differ substantially," unquote. For example, Block noted concerning the trait extraversion that, and this is a long quote, so bear with me, historically, this factor, extraversion, has also been labeled as assertiveness, power, activity, positive emotionality, and interpersonal involvement. Roberts, Walton, and Wichtbauer found it crucial to bifurcate extraversion into the dimensions of social vitality and social dominance. Does this factor imply sociability, as averred by Guilford in 1977, or impulsivity, as Eidenseck said in the same year, or a varying mixture of the two? Is the facet impulsivity better included within this five-factor model broad factor, as Goldberg preferred, or better located within the neuroticism factor, as fixed in the facets of Costa and McCry? Thus, there continues to be confusion and contestation regarding various construals of this factor. Different psychologists project importantly differing views of this fundamental domain. The dictionary does not especially help. It is defined by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary of 2003 as the act, state, or habit of being predominantly concerned with and obtaining gratification from what is outside the self. I submit that the word extraversion, although by now having developed broad colloquial usage, is not sufficiently univocal to permit serious scientific usage. In other words, researchers do not actually agree on what the five factors exactly mean. They have not pinned down an absolute, perfectly worded definition. And they haven't done that because there is no such thing as a perfect definition, because different definitions work better in different scenarios for different people. They could have taken a page out of Derrida's book, how assigning a word to a thing does not accomplish nearly as much as we like to think that it does, because the word defers its meaning to other words that in turn defer to other words, forming eventually a holistic context of language from which it is impossible to extract a truly objective meaning. You can only get meaning subjectively. This is a fancy way of saying that we're guided more by our intuitions than we care to admit. The irony, of course, is that the Big Five succumbs to the very problem it was created to solve. I have a friend who, as an experiment, found and took every Big Five test she could find online. Her answers varied just as much as they have with the Myers-Briggs tests, and this is simply because the different tests used different language, and different language carries different connotations to different people who will then answer differently on different tests. The only way to solve this problem is to set up some official institution that can claim here is the official Big Five test. All the other tests are heresies. And then to give that institution the power to enforce its orthodoxy upon others, censoring alternate wordings of its perfected creed. But that, of course, is contrary to the nature of scientific inquiry, which is supposed to let the objective facts speak for themselves, not to dictate esoteric truths to an obedient crowd. But in psychology, such self-evident, democratically friendly, objective facts of the kind that you'll find in geology and physics are very hard to come by, because psychology is a study of subjectivity itself. There, we are more heavily dependent upon concepts instead of hard facts. As Jung noted in Psychological Types, quote, "How much of the actual psychology of man can be experienced and observed as quantitatively measurable facts? Such facts do exist, but anyone who has probed more deeply into the nature of psychology will also have realized that an experimental method will never succeed in doing justice to the nature of the human psyche, nor will it ever project anything like a true picture of the more complex psychic phenomena. But once we leave the domain of measurable facts, we are dependent on concepts, which have now to take over the role of measure and number. The precision which measure and number lend to the observed fact can be replaced only by the precision of the concept. The concept of feeling, for instance, does express something characteristic that, though not susceptible of quantitative measurement, nevertheless palpably exists." Unquote. This lack of objective measure means there is no central, unquestionable authority to whom Big Five proponents have to answer, nor any standard by which they might officially settle disputes about the concepts they are discussing. There is only the hopefully shared intuition of what the 5 words mean in English. And how am I to align my intuition of the words' meanings with yours? By familiarizing myself with the general culture that employs those 5 words. To put it cynically, I have to drink whatever Kool-Aid the other psychologists are drinking. I have to be part of their culture, initiated into their language games, into their Derridean context. And even then, there will never be an objective way to confirm that I really am understanding conscientiousness or extraversion in precisely the same way as you. There will only be our unspoken agreement that neither of us will call the other one out in public, because then it will become painfully obvious that there is nothing to actually settle such a dispute.